What happened that time you suffered from secondhand embarrassment on behalf of someone who wasn't even embarrassed? Story 1. I guess you could call him my step-grandpa. My mom's weird husband brought his dad. Part of it is autism, part of it is he's an old man who's never been challenged on his hogwash to Olive Garden. First, he just sort of announces his drink order to the hostess while she's doing menus. Easy mistake to make, thinking the hostess is the waitress. Except his drink order is, "I need a tall glass of skim milk." Both the hostess and then later the waitress had to explain to him why they don't just have a gallon of skim milk lying around. This made him so angry, he said it was stupid and that they had the wrong cows. So I'm thinking, well, that was hell on earth. I guess old people forget not all restaurants are Denny's, and autistic people have important habits and routines. At least he has a water now. Nope. As you know, Olive Garden brings many things to the table. Drinks, soups, salads, breads, refills, cheese graters, and then more breads. Our waitress was new, so she had a hard time carrying so many things on one tray. She took a few trips. When she showed up with a big salad bowl and a bunch of salad plates, he was furious that she forgot his soup. When she showed up with the soups and breadsticks, he freaked out that she should have brought 2 baskets, except, oh my goodness, she did bring 2 baskets. I swear to deity at one point when the waitress poured water in his glass, I heard him try to go, "No, I ordered milk." But it was either quiet enough that the waitress didn't hear or stupid enough that she ran away. The worst part of all of that is that the 70-year-old man was allowed to adopt a 10-year-old girl. By the time they were 72 and 12, he had turned her into a total pariah. She had a major mustache that no one talked to her about. She didn't wash, wore the same basketball clothes until they smelled like butt, and she didn't see anything wrong or unusual about her father making the waitress cry real tears. So that was the night I cringed for like 2 hours straight. This is a horrible story. Get that girl some help, and it definitely sounds like this man may be in the early stages of dementia. How did a 70-year-old man get permission in this state to adopt? Was he single at this point? If he wasn't single, what did his spouse have to do about this? Was the spouse part of the picture? It doesn't look like it. Or maybe she was. Where was she in this situation? Very weird. And this person is not cringing at all. The daughter isn't, the 10-year-old, the 12-year-old? Weird. Story 2. A woman in the store I work with is the most cringe-inducing person I've ever met. She sings to customers unprompted and without saying anything else to them, and then stares at them expecting praise. She used to wear a shirt that says, "I write fan fiction. What's your superpower?" and refused to put her apron on so everyone would see it until management had to ban shirts with writing on them. She tells customers about her fan fiction in detail. She almost physically fought another employee who is a Captain America fan because she wouldn't admit that Captain America is, quote, "a complete piece of trash who deserves to expire," unquote. She keeps going places she has no reason to be in and getting stuck, so one of the guys has to rescue her, and if the person who comes and gets her isn't a dude, she'll get stuck again. She tries to sneakily listen to conversations so she can butt in with one of her impressive, but doesn't realize a 400-pound woman can't sneak for anything. And she forgets, or pretends to forget, to take her medication at least once a week, and then over-exaggerates her symptoms for sympathy. The last time she did it, she rolled around on the floor and pretended like she didn't know who anyone was until someone told her she needed to go home if she was that affected. Also, she has a crush on me, and a crush on my brother, and a crush on our exceedingly gay manager, and a crush on half the stock team, except, of course, the black/brown guys. And she thinks she's sexy and suave. I'm a bigger person, so I can't say much, but, the woman genuinely looks like a pig. She also hates women and thinks she's much better than all of them, so she won't listen if a woman gives her directions. She's basically a female neckbeard, right down to the fedoras. She wears a fedora into the store sometimes and then throws a fit when she can't wear it on the floor. This would be, well, not normal, but at least a little more understandable if she were in her teens, but she's almost 30 years old. I hate this stranger so much. I never thought I would see the day where there would be a woman neckbeard. Right down, and they said right down to the fedora. Has there just not been enough reaction to guys wearing fedoras and espousing fanfic that we just don't recognize this behavior, that we don't just shun this behavior? It's amazing that this person is just living her main character life in her head. Story 3. Went out to dinner for a friend's birthday. 3 people we know who are all an item together are invited, but are known for being notoriously cheap, and it's explained to them that the place my friend picked was a bit pricey beforehand. Brazilian steakhouse. They were told the price of dinner, and they're like, that's fine. 2 guys and a girl. We'll call them Fred, George, and Susie, and their 1-year-old daughter. Susie keeps complaining the entire night. That freaking waitress keeps interrupting. She was doing the simple check. Is everything all right? We could have done this cheaper and better at home. The meat here sucks. Fred and George were defending her the entire time. Yeah, honey, you're right. Then the bill comes. Fred starts arguing with the waitress. Well, we didn't think it was very good, so I don't think we should pay full price. Also, my wife only ate the salad bar, a lie, so she should only be charged for that. The entire thing was absolutely cringy. The guy whose birthday it is pretty much mortified and embarrassed at this point because they're arguing for 15 minutes and didn't have a leg to stand on. Finally, the manager comes over and gives Fred and George their meals half off and charges Susie for only the salad bar. They didn't leave a tip either. I doubled my tip and wrote an apology on the receipt. They then kept complaining about it the next 10 minutes while people were saying goodbye. I snapped, calling Susie a pretentious, stuck-up shrew, and walked off. I had to sit next to her the entire time, so after 2 hours, my fuse was gone. All right, how was the 1-year-old handling this? That got kind of left by the wayside of the details. And also, it doesn't look like this person was secondhand embarrassment. It said that the person whose birthday it was cringing the entire time, too. I think it was just cringe all around for this. Story 4. My friend got drunk, and usually I'm able to stop her in time when she tries to do something embarrassing. I was at the party with her, and she said she had to go to the bathroom. I waited for her outside so I could drive her home, but got distracted when my brother's best friend, also drunk, started vomiting in the bushes next to me. After a little while, I went back in the house to find my friend, assuming she was still in the bathroom. I knocked on the door. I heard her muffled voice through the door and things like, "I've thought about this for a while. We should really give this a try," and other things that were barely intelligible because she was just that drunk. I barged in to stop her from doing whatever the heck it was she was up to, only to find her on the phone. I took the phone from her and looked at the caller ID. It was our professor's name. At 2 a.m., she had drunk dialed our young, attractive, creative writing teacher and told him she was in love with him. She was not. The next day, she had to sit through that class, very hungover, and she didn't even care. She actually thought it was hilarious. Luckily, he was cool and just laughed it off when she apologized later. Too long didn't read? Friend drunk dialed our professor, confessed her undying love for him, and had to sit through his class for an entire semester. Story 5. I was 14. My best friend, who was really only my best friend because I was a quiet, autistic, submissive type who would go along with whatever she, a dominant personality, said, was trying to fit in with a crowd of loud, funny, popular kids. The only catch was that just wasn't her personality. She's not a witty person. She'd been cracking jokes and remarks in almost every class all week, and so far, a pity chuckle was the best response she'd gotten. One day, we're all in registration class waiting on our tutor to come in and take the roll call before we head off to class, and she thinks it'd be hilarious to get up and switch off the light. She struts over, flicks it off, and as she's walking back to her seat, one of the language teachers walk in. Her name? Did you just turn off the light? Yeah. The teacher looked confused and just asked, why? She responds with the most scat-eating grin, because it was bright, and glances back at the class waiting for someone to laugh. No laughter came. Everyone either looked confused, annoyed, or, like me, scared as to what the teacher would reply. I sank down into my seat. The teacher looked uncomfortable, said, well, yeah, that's the point. Tutor's name is on her way down. She just got stuck in traffic and left. I can feel third-hand embarrassment through this story. Story 6. It was in my public speaking class at a community college over a decade ago. I can't remember the exact assignment or the context of the assignment, but we had to give a speech in front of the class every week. This girl got up in front of everyone and gave a full 5-minute speech about how her friend had intimacy in the butthole, and I didn't like it. I have erased most of what happened from memory for good reason, but I just remember her shouting at the top of her lungs the phrase, intimacy in the butthole, multiple times in 5 minutes. I have never been more uncomfortable in my entire life, and you could tell the entire class felt the same. Then I looked at the professor in the back of the class, and she was white as a ghost. Like she didn't know how to process what the frick just happened. Sitting through 5 minutes of that was the most uncomfortable experience I've ever had in my entire life. I wonder if those 5 minutes made the class feel more uncomfortable than the friend felt when they had intimacy in the butthole and didn't like it. If this speaker actually felt no shame from speaking about this kind of subject, she should probably pursue a career writing intimate fiction for Amazon books. I know quite a few authors' names that have made a living doing this kind of stuff. I don't think I can say their names here. Probably the comments will gladly elaborate. Story 7. Someone I was dating and I were ordering at Culver's Drive-thru. She was talking to her mom over the car's Bluetooth, and then all of a sudden, her and her mother started cussing and yelling at each other. Well, if you don't know, at Culver's, the whole shop can hear you if you're at the drive-thru. The manager came barreling out with a red face telling her, "You have to leave now. This is a family establishment, as people don't want to hear your profanity." That only ticked her off more, and she started going off on this manager. So, dumb old me thought maybe I could be the voice of reason. I say, "Hey, let's just go somewhere else. We don't need them spitting in our food." I personally don't think they would have, but she's a germaphobe to the max, and I was just trying to convince her to leave. She left all right, and I just stood there with the manager feeling so embarrassed about her anger issues, and then getting kicked out of the car. Story 8. My mother-in-law does stuff all the time where it's embarrassing. One of the most embarrassing things I remember, though, is we were at Olive Garden, since this is where my nephew wanted to go for his birthday. She asked for a senior menu. She had maybe just turned the age where you would even qualify or get a senior discount. When the server told her they didn't have a separate senior menu, She demanded to speak to a manager and complain about it. Everyone there was mortified. Pretty sure my brother-in-law left a hefty tip as part of an apology. My wife's father would buy those fundraiser coupon books every year. Whenever we'd take him to dinner, he'd bring the coupon book, even though we told him every time that we were paying and didn't want to use the coupon. Since we were taking him out on holidays, the coupons were always not accepted. We finally stopped taking him out after he threatened to strangle the waitress. Story 9. In terms of real life, a buddy of mine was talking to this girl we all knew, and they'd been getting pretty flirty. So the decision was to invite her camping with us in the hopes one of them wouldn't make a move. Flash forward to that night, and our buddy did seemingly everything he could to mess it up. Spilled beer on her, stuck his finger in her mouth for no reason while she had a look of what the hell is going on here. Finally, somehow, she still didn't hate him, and towards the end of the night, he tried to kiss her and headbutted her pretty dang hard, moving in too fast. After this, they had a talk, because this girl was apparently the crown princess of second chances, and he threw up on her. Obviously, this was God's way of intervention. The Lord stepped in to save that poor girl with a Hail Mary pass at the end there. I'm sure there are some girls that would feel that this was the girl trying to escape a guy going from awkward to possibly violent for fear of rejection. I don't know if the guy was like this, and he probably wasn't. But do you think some girls just give guys more of second chances because they're trying to placate them and not inspire them to stalkerishness? What do you think? Story 10. Almost every day this past school year, this girl who sat next to me in our math class, deity, she'd literally raise her hand until the professor saw her, then say these incredibly dumb jokes. Examples? Ha ha ha, who has the brain cell? And other trash that almost made sense, but definitely didn't fit the tone. Professor was a super quiet mid-30s guy who didn't even try to smile in response. I don't blame him, by the way. Deeper in the year, the worse it got, like 2 or 3 times a class. I'd actually have to physically put my forehead against the desk because I felt so uncomfortable. I actually made a friend through it, though. The other girl who sat next to me hated it too. We'd make uncomfortable eye contact and cringe together until the moments passed. I just hope everyone knew I wasn't a part of that whole mess. Story 11. My college did a free field days event where they hosted rides and games and other stuff during the springtime. They had a big sumo wrestling ring where you put on the fat suits. I was sitting on a nearby bench watching people. It was a pretty fun time just watching people bumble around. Then this guy comes up and he probably weighs 450, 500 pounds. They start trying to fit him into the sumo suit, and it's pretty clear right away that the suit is just not going to zip up on him. They tried for like 10 full minutes to get that suit on him. It might not sound like a long time, but it felt like 40 freaking years when you have that many people just standing around watching as they try to fit a fat guy into an even fatter guy suit. Story 12. Once in high school, we had an assignment to write an introduction for an imaginary movie, book, play, or whatever you wanted. The teacher showed us a short text as an example. The weird girl in my class used that text and read from it at the end of the very same class, and we were all like, "You didn't write it. It was the example the teacher showed us just now." And she burst down crying and said that we were all mean to her and that she wrote it all by herself and that it was just a coincidence that it was identical with the example. Cringed so hard. You'd be surprised how often students say it's just a coincidence when they get caught plagiarizing and their work is word for word from Spark Notes, and they stick to the lie no matter what. I was actually just watching a video about a compilation of this comedian and all the jokes that for some reason seem to be taken word from other comedians. I think the person that was making all of these jokes called it parallel thinking, and everyone else called it plagiarism. It's kind of hard to be that ignorant in the face of all this evidence. Story 13. I was at a college basketball game years ago when there was a bad call on the ref's part, and the guy like 2 rows ahead of me and my friends yelled out something like, "You frick your mother with that mouth?" Like it was really weird and inappropriate and not something you'd yell at the ref because it makes no sense. And then, like, everyone around him just got quiet and turned around to get a look at the guy who just yelled that with a "what the frick is wrong with this guy" look on their faces. I think the best thing I've ever heard yelled at a ref was during a minor league hockey game, when the ref made a bad call and this older lady stood up and shouted, "Go back to Foot Locker." The whole crowd was dying. Story 14. I worked concert security. One shift after the show finished, we were slowly moving the crowds toward the exit. 3 of us guards were walking together when one of them spotted a woman standing just outside of the bathroom holding a beer. This guard, female, walks up to the woman and says, "You really shouldn't be drinking that while pregnant." The woman replies, "I'm holding this for my husband until he gets out of the bathroom." The other guard and myself pick up the pace to distance ourselves from our fumbling coworker when we hear the woman continue, "Also, I'm not pregnant." I've never run so fast from a situation in my life. I never question whether or not someone's pregnant if I notice a little pudge in their stomach. I wait for someone else, or that person in particular, to say it.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 15. I was on a romantic walk through the park with my girlfriend. There were lots of families enjoying the warm weather. I saw this young boy, 10 to 13, from my peripheral being to throw up behind a tree so his mom wouldn't see him. Like full-on throw up, with one hand holding the tree for support. When he was done, he skipped away casually. A few moments later, he came back to said tree and decided to pee out of the view of his mom. He dropped trow to his ankles and started peeing. Unfortunately, he wasn't facing the tree when he did this, and he was not out of the view of anyone. Literally, the only person who couldn't see him was his mother. He peed with no regard whatsoever. That was 2 weeks ago, and I'm still cringing. If this kid were like 3 or 4 or 5, I might understand a little bit of the fearlessness, but 10 to 13? You should have learned some sort of manners by now. The park is not a place for that kind of activity. Especially the vomiting. I mean, did this park even have any restrooms? Story 16. I was one day going out with my dad and his working colleague in a bar to have some drinks. I had a fresh driving license, so I shouldn't drink and drive them home after. It was not my dad whom I was embarrassed by, but his colleague, who really said to some hot blonde sitting next to me on the bar, totally drunk, "I think you need a proper daddy." And the girl looks in disgust and stands up and takes 2 seats away. She was my age as well, and the friend of my father was nearly double my age. Maybe because the girl was my age, I was embarrassed even more. This is awful. The third-hand embarrassment is strong. Story 17. My buddy and I were at our local bar with some friends, and he got smashed on one too many shots of Goldschlager. Oh, Goldschlager. Don't remind me. He suddenly decided he was a pool shark and tried to show off in front of some girls, as he challenged everyone in the bar to beat him. In 4 games, he sank 2 shots, both by accident. All I could do was shake my head as he continued to make a butt of himself. Worst of all, this was in front of a bar full of regulars, so he heard about that for years after. That sounds like how my dad used to make some extra money back in the late 60s, except he all of a sudden got good. Story 18. I went to culinary school. It was me and 3 other girls in our dorm room. Filled with embarrassment for one of my roommates as another roommate desperately tried to explain to her that Hamburger Helper doesn't have any beef in it. You have to buy the ground beef separate. She just did not understand. I have a billion stories about stuff she said or did. She really was so ignorant and clueless about the wildest things, which always baffled me because she came from a very affluent family with 3 siblings attending one of the biggest colleges in our state. Every single story makes me embarrassed for her. To be fair, if she came from an affluent family, she's probably never had Hamburger Helper. Story 19. Old mongrel of a boss of mine, 69, was trying to flirt with a 20-something female cashier in front of me. This dude had a stroke or something because his face constantly twitched, and he was just an all-around awkward person to be around. He has the worst flirting approach and execution I've ever seen, leaves the girl extremely uncomfortable. I'm embarrassed, and when we walk out, he says, "Hell, man, I think I blew it in there. My game is not like what it used to be." I remember in that moment, I thought, dude, that trash was so bad Helen Keller would have been embarrassed. He did many other embarrassing things, but that one was probably the worst. Story 20. Went to a steakhouse for my graduation party along with my father-in-law, mother-in-law, mom, wife, and daughter. Father-in-law orders mashed loaded potatoes, which I found weird since he always orders baked loaded potatoes. Waitress comes back with our order, and he very condescendingly starts to berate her about how he didn't order that and to take it back. I was too chicken to call him out on it, mostly just wanted the whole thing to be over. As a past server, there is nothing that feels better than when someone says I got their order wrong, even though I know I didn't, and one of their family members sticks up for me. Story 21. Was at a friend's graduation ceremony for my dad and a few friends. My dad started playing a video on his phone with the volume at max, and everyone heard. Literally all eyes were on him. I had to tell him his video was so loud everyone was looking. He stopped the video, but didn't think it was a big deal. My friends and I, who were sitting right next to him, were cringing. Later, I found out my dad is actually deaf in one ear, which explained a lot over the years looking back. Story 22. Oh, this just happened yesterday. First class of summer semester in grad school, we were going around introducing ourselves. Professor wanted a typical, "what do you do for fun" kind of answer. And this 50-year-old IT guy just deadpan says, "I love smoking crystallized Peruvian marching powder." Clearly it was a joke, but it did not land. Everyone else in the room just stared at him until he said he was kidding. I'm sorry, but I would have laughed at that. Story 23. Xbox Live parties when a chick joins, and there is always a guy or two who starts pathetically flirting. I generally have to mute my mic, mutter cheese and frickin' crackers, and grab a beer. As that chick, a little solidarity goes a long way. Even if it's just a generic, knock it off. The number of times I've had to quit out of a session that I've really been enjoying because I'm so uncomfortable is pretty high. I no longer play GTA because of it. Story 24. I've told this story before, but I was a news reporter and I went to cover a local NAACP event. The host had a written-out history of the local chapter she wanted a teenage girl to read. The girl took one look at it and handed it back saying, "I can't read this. It hasn't been proofread." Very awkward. The host read it herself. It sounded like it had been written by a first grader. I like that teenager. You're not making me look stupid. Story 25. I was in 7th grade and people thought that I liked this guy. So one day my friend asked me if I liked him and I whispered, "I don't like guys. I like girls." My friend shouted that I was gay. The guy I liked walked up to me later that day and said, "Well, that's a relief. I don't think I blushed harder any other day than that. This is so 7th grade cringe it hurts." Story 26. This actually happened to me on Mother's Day. My sisters were burping and farting without any shame despite us eating outside with 2 tables right next to us. Also, keep in mind my sisters are in their early 30s/late 20s. That, and my mother always asks for condiments and extra drinks, and when the waiter comes over with them, my mother never says thank you. Story 27. That Hulk/Ant-Man Endgame scene where the kids don't want a picture with Scott? I got so much embarrassment/cringe while everyone was laughing. When I saw Endgame, as soon as the movie started, a guy runs up to the front of the theater while recording a Snapchat and yelling, "Who's ready for Endgame?" And not a single person said anything. Story 28. My friend telling my environmental science professor that climate change isn't real, and that we're really going through global cooling. Oh man, I was just at a conference where one of the panelists compared something to global warming because, it's always going up and down, up and down. Freaking misinformation. Story 29. Don't know if anyone will see this, but my mom dragged me to her friend's wedding reception and decided to show off her interpretive dancing skills, as she put it. We have a picture of her flapping her arms around like a bird while I'm dying inside in the background. Story 30. 18-year-old typical sheltered girl asked in high pitch with innocent tone what self-stimulation is in class in uni in the first semester. Wouldn't even shut up about it until she got an answer. Was awkward for the prof and everyone. Story 31. My buddy tried hitting on my sister. I always thought it would be cool to have a chick that's a female version of my name here. Swing and a miss. I don't think it's your sister he was hitting on. Story 32. A guy got pretty loud and confrontational with the waiters in a restaurant, to the point where people from multiple tables were staring at him going off. He just sat down afterwards like nothing had happened. I'm not leaving. I'm finishing my coffee. Yep, enjoying my coffee. Walter. Story 33. My dad came with us on a field trip back in elementary school. We had an admittedly attractive substitute teacher that day, and she was introducing herself to all the parents. Sub. Hello, I'm Miss Fine. Dad. Why, yes you are. Sub. Walks away. Story 34. My girlfriend can't watch Impractical Jokers because she gets embarrassed for the guys on the show. If you haven't seen the show, it's basically 4 comedians that compete to embarrass each other. Prepare for something amazing. Story 35. Every day during our 9 a.m. production meeting, whenever the plant manager calls on Greg, he's going to say something wholly inappropriate or go off on a tangent. Every frickin' time. Otherwise, he's a great guy. Story 36. I was in a bus with a dude I knew, and he tried to not pay for his ride. He was busted and kept on insisting that he paid. It was painful to watch. Denial really kicks in when you realize you've been caught out. Story 37. A girl in creative writing shared her whole life story about her strict parents and how she had an unhealthy obsession with her sister. Didn't even bat an eye. The teacher desperately tried to stop her. Story 38. My dad talks about owning the libs, praises Ben Shapiro constantly and says, "Oh, we're starting a Me Too movement?" every time a guy touches a girl. Your dad is esoteric boomer. Story 39. This isn't even technically a real person, but I can never watch American Pie again. The scene with the pie got me so bad I just turned off the movie and never finished it. Story 40. Every day a girl comes up to me with a bag of chips, in a redneck voice yells, "Who wants some diabetes?" and later in the day greets me in a Russian accent. Story 41. This time in high school when this girl was singing at our Christmas assembly. She was nice enough, but honestly couldn't sing very well. It was so embarrassing. Story 42. A buddy of mine said he was trying to live vicariously through his friend instead of vicariously. I almost perished of discomfort. Story 43. Old roommate dressed up in a tuxedo and slicked back his hair to go meet the girl he met on the internet who stood him up. Twice. Story 44. Anytime some racist relative makes an off-color joke, especially in front of whichever ethnic group they're making fun of. Story 45. When my friend came over to my house for the first time and tried hitting on my stepsister only to find out that she's straight. Story 46. My dad making semi-flirtatious comments to waitresses in restaurants.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.